There's a big Sega announcement coming this week on June 4th that, according to the journalist breaking it, is revolutionary and will rile up the video game industry. Since then, rumors have been flying around about what this announcement could potentially be, and I want to take a look at some of those rumors and give my thoughts on the probability of them and close on the big one. Is Sega teaming up with Microsoft to launch the Xbox Series X in Japan under Sega Branding? What's going on, guys? I'm RGT85. If this is your first time on the channel, be sure to hit that subscribe button. But without any further ado, let's talk about this big Sega announcement, what it could potentially be, and how Microsoft might actually be involved with this as well. So this scoop is coming to us from a journalist named Zenji Nishikawa, who is a Japanese journalist who has an upcoming article in the June 4th issue of Famitsu magazine. And he basically said the following about this article. My column in next week's issue of Famitsu is crazy. I got a huge scoop. It's a world premiere article and an exclusive. It's a scoop from a game company that everyone loves. An insane scoop. Last year, Wired got the exclusive story on the PlayStation 5, right? Other media didn't. It's that level of a scoop. I interviewed a certain company's executive and technical staff. It's really revolutionary. Really, it's a revolution. He also went on to say that this is pretty much confirmed to be a Sega related announcement and that it does not involve a Dreamcast 2 or Sega coming back into the home console market, at least in a traditional way. Now, one thing that is worth noting is that Sega's 60th anniversary is of course taking place starting on June 3rd. So this sort of announcement in Famitsu magazine will be sort of coinciding with that big 60th anniversary. Of course, Sega has been teasing some stuff in the past, and now it looks like something is finally coming to fruition. And since this has been sort of thrown out there, a lot of people have been thinking about different things that this could potentially be. So I want to go over the list of things and sort of see how I feel about them and what I feel the probability of them is. So the first thing that a lot of people have been saying is that this is going to be something Sonic the Hedgehog related. Now, obviously that's not necessarily revolutionary or will rile up the video game industry, but there could be some sort of hyperbole being used to sort of get people to draw into the Famitsu article so that they pick up the article and read this article. But the one thing Sonic related that I think that could be potentially very exciting would be a Sonic Adventure 3. Now, of course, the Sonic Adventure series is a series that Sonic fans really seem to enjoy. It was a great entry into the 3D franchise for Sega and Sonic the Hedgehog, and I feel like Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 still hold up till today, but it has been a very long time since we've gotten a new Sonic Adventure game. Since then, we've gotten tons of 3D Sonic games, but none of them were really quite up to the level that Sonic Adventure brought to the table. Now, is that on the same level as something like a PlayStation 5 announcement? No, but once again, obviously there could be some hyperbole being used when it comes to this announcement to sort of drum up interest in it. Another thing that a lot of people seem to be thinking could potentially come to the table is a new mini system from Sega. Now, of course, Sega released the Sega Genesis Mini last year, and it seemed to do pretty well. Most people that got their hands on one seemed to really enjoy it. The variety of games that was on there was really well done. Of course, you had English versions of the game, you had Japanese versions of the game as well, and it was just a really well-built system. We actually reviewed it here on the channel. We did some exclusive reveals of the games that were coming to the system, and really just for a variety standpoint, I think Sega really nailed the Sega Genesis Mini. Now, of course, there are two other systems that I feel like a lot of people would like to see a mini of, the Sega Saturn Mini and the Sega Dreamcast Mini. Now, the Sega Saturn Mini, I think, would be a bit problematic. Sega emulation for the Sega Saturn is finally starting to come along. It's getting to a very healthy point, but I still feel like there still needs to be some refinements to Sega Saturn emulation just because of the way that system was built with the architecture of the system. But something like a Dreamcast Mini, I think, is a lot more probable. We, of course, have seen Dreamcast games come to things like Xbox Live and PSN via different compilations. There was the Dreamcast compilation that's currently available on things like Steam and the Xbox Live and PSN, so I feel like that could potentially be sort of a thing. But once again, we go back to that statement of revolutionary and rile up the video game industry. Maybe not so revolutionary, as mini systems are becoming pretty common nowadays, but I feel like it would sort of rile up the video game industry to sort of see a new mini console coming to us from Sega. But still, that's something that I think could be done on Sega's own time, and I'm not really sure that that's on the same level as something like a PlayStation 5. But what about an all Sega streaming service that comes to different platforms? I think that could potentially be something that would rile up the video game industry. Of course, over on mobile devices, you have Sega Forever, where you could download various Sega Genesis and Game Gear games on your mobile device for essentially free. Sure, there's advertisements in it, but if you choose to, you can purchase the game and get rid of the advertisements, or you could simply play through the entire game and just have to deal with ads throughout it. So what if something like Sega Forever came to home consoles? That is something that has actually been rumored in the past, and I think that's something that would actually be somewhat revolutionary and would rile up the video game industry. Seeing a company taking their back catalog of games and releasing them via a digital service available across all major platforms would be something that has never been seen before. Obviously, when you look at things like PC gaming, there's different launchers. Each company seems to be developing their own launchers when it comes to the ways to play their games, but as far as on home consoles is concerned, you're not really seeing anything like that. I guess the closest thing would be EA Access, which really wouldn't be quite the same thing. So a digital Sega service for all consoles, I think, would be pretty revolutionary and would rile up the video game industry, especially when you look at the back catalog of Sega games. What systems would it entail? I mean, obviously things like the Sega Genesis and the Sega Game Gear, but maybe they could do some Dreamcast related things, or even some potentially easy running Sega Saturn games on this platform as well. I think that's something that would be very exciting, and honestly, I would really like to see that, and I think that has a potential to be the announcement that we see on June 4th, because I feel like it hits all the check marks that are sort of being hyped up for this announcement. But of course, the biggest and most interesting announcements coming out from this rumor is the fact that a lot of people are starting to talk about Microsoft and Microsoft's potential involvement with this announcement coming on June 4th. Now, obviously, Microsoft has a lot of things going on right now within the world of video games. The Xbox Series X is coming out very soon, and Microsoft has been acquiring quite a few studios. So people are starting to think, well, maybe Microsoft has acquired Sega, and that will be in this announcement. First and foremost, there is no way that a big acquisition like that would be revealed in a magazine article. I just don't see that being a thing. And really, when you look at Sega as a company isn't the same Sega from 10 to 15 years ago when Microsoft could have potentially bought Sega. Sega is, of course, a Sega corporation that has Sega and Atlas under them, under the Sammy brand. Sammy is the owner of Sega and Atlas right now, and Sega and Atlas are very profitable for Sammy, you know, not even necessarily with video games, but of course things like casinos and pachinko machines in Japan, which are very, very popular. I don't see Sammy willing to give up the Sega Atlas branding to Microsoft because it would cost a lot of money. Sammy is worth a lot of money, and I don't really necessarily feel like getting rid of one of their big cash cows would be very profitable for the company. So I definitely don't think Microsoft has purchased Sega. Like I said, I don't think this would necessarily be revealed in a video game magazine article as well, because this is more so on the business side of things. There's obviously a lot of things that would go into an acquisition of that level, so it just doesn't make sense to me. But there are two Microsoft related things that I definitely think are worth exploring. The first one being an exclusive deal between Sega and Microsoft for Xbox Series X related games. Now, of course, Microsoft and Sega have teamed up before. When you look at the original Xbox, I hate to tell you this, kiddies, but that was pretty much the Dreamcast 2. Looking at the library of games that Sega brought to the platform, exclusive games, games like Shenmue 2, games like Panzer Dragoon Orta, games like Sega GT, Jet Set Radio, like, there was a bunch of Sega games that came exclusively to the original Xbox because Sega pretty much looked at the Xbox as sort of the Dreamcast 2, and this partnership is what sort of put Microsoft on the map when it comes to the video game landscape. Of course, games like Halo definitely helped as well, but having that Sega backing with those Sega IPs and those Sega exclusives on the Xbox original definitely helped sort of propel the Xbox original brand into the home marketplace and get people's eyes on Microsoft when it comes to video game consoles. So could Sega and Microsoft be teaming up with some sort of exclusive games? I think there's a little bit of a clue when it comes to that, and that has to do with the recent Yakuza game that was, of course, revealed during the Xbox Series X event. Look, Yakuza is a franchise that has always been sort of tied in with the PlayStation brand. PlayStation has always gotten the rights to them for quite a while. The Yakuza games were only on the PlayStation series of consoles, but now all of a sudden a brand new Yakuza game is announced, and it's announced as coming to the Xbox Series X during Microsoft's latest presentation. So I feel like the precedent is almost sort of set for things like that to potentially happen in this upcoming coming generation with Sega and Microsoft. So could this be the big reveal that will rile up the video game industry? Sega putting games exclusively on the Xbox Series X, with a lot of their back catalog of games being breathed into new life with new entries in these games. The precedent is there. We've seen the groundwork and we've seen this happen before, so I think that is a definite possibility. But the craziest thing that I've heard from this whole thing has to be that Microsoft will be releasing the Xbox Series X in Japan, but will be using Sega branding. So it'll be like the Sega Series X in Japan. And at first I was like, that's just absolutely crazy. It really doesn't make much sense. But the more I thought about it, the more I think that could potentially be a thing. Look, if you want to talk about something to rile up the video game industry, you want to talk about something revolutionary, this would be it. You have never seen a system release in a major territory that is being branded under another company's branding. Now, why would Xbox and Sega want to do something like that? Obviously, if Sega is going to do things like put exclusive games on the Xbox Series X, they're going to want those games to sell. And Sega is still a very viable partner in the Japanese marketplace. But when you look at Microsoft, well, nobody cares about the Xbox brand in Japan. It is by far in third place. It has always been like that. The original Xbox, the Xbox 360, and the Xbox One have not sold well in Japan at all. Microsoft has never gotten a foothold in one of the largest video game markets in the world. Sony and of course Nintendo definitely dominate that marketplace. But if you have a familiar brand like Sega on the Xbox Series X, would people be more enticed to check out the Xbox Series X? Would they be more willing to see what this system brings to the table, since Sega is still a viable brand in that area, and Sega of course is still a big brand in that area, and of course people have nostalgia for the Sega brand in Japan? I think it's a possibility, especially if you tie it into games. If Sega is releasing exclusive games on the Xbox Series X, and these games end up coming to Japan as well, which of course would be a very smart thing to do, to have that Sega branding on the Xbox Series X could actually help propel that into the marketplace and make people interested in what the Xbox brand is actually doing right now. I know it sounds absolutely crazy, but it would rile up the video game industry. It's absolutely revolutionary, and more people are starting to talk about the potential for this to be a thing. And the more I think about it, the more it kind of makes sense. Now, I'm not saying that that is going to be the announcement. This is Sega after all, and I'm sure whatever this announcement will be underwhelming for a lot of people, because people like to get hyped up about these announcements. But June 4th is also when the PlayStation 5 is being unveiled with a big presentation. So what if Microsoft is able to undercut them a little bit by talking about how the Sega brand will be on the Xbox Series X in Japan for the launch of the system? It's absolutely crazy to think about, but I think the potential for something like that is there, and I don't even think I would necessarily be shocked if that's what the announcement is. Alright, so we have gone over some of the possibilities for what this announcement is going to be, but I want to hear what you guys have to think about this. Do you think any of the possibilities that I brought to the table are what Sega is going to unveil on June 4th via Famitsu magazine, or do you think that it's going to be something smaller, something more overwhelming, something that, well, gamers won't really necessarily care about? Maybe it's something more along the video game business side of things than just the actual video game industry. So let me know in the comment section down below, and as always, thank you guys for checking out this video. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Check out other videos on the channel as well. And as always, I'll catch you guys on the next one. Later.